The spoils of war were distributed, and they gave me the fiercest alien vampire woman in the galaxy. The distribution hall smelled like recycled air and desperation, which Henry supposed was fitting for a place where human lives were being reorganized like inventory. He stood in line behind 200 other soldiers, each waiting to hear what consolation prize the Terran Command had deemed appropriate for their service. Most expected salvage rights to derelict ships, maybe a promotion that meant nothing now that the war was over, perhaps a prefab housing unit on one of the colonies that hadn't been glassed during the fighting. Henry expected nothing. He'd spent the entire war maintaining atmospheric processors on a supply station 3 jumps from any actual combat. His most heroic moment involved rerouting oxygen to a cargo bay before someone's illegal pet suffocated. The pet turned out to be a Venusian moss colony, which didn't even breathe oxygen, but nobody had bothered to tell him that until afterward. "Officer Henry Castellan," the distribution coordinator called out, her voice flat with the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been reading names for 6 hours straight. She didn't even look up from her datapad. Henry approached the desk, already rehearsing his gracious acceptance of whatever meaningless certificate they'd printed for him. Instead, the coordinator's expression shifted into something he couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe, or possibly sympathy. "You've been assigned a Category 7 asset," she said, which meant absolutely nothing to him. "Please proceed to Holding Bay 12 for transfer of custody." "I think there's been a mistake," Henry said. "I'm just, No mistakes. Next." 2 security officers materialized at his elbows, which seemed excessive for someone collecting a broken nav computer or whatever Category 7 meant. They guided him through a series of corridors that grew progressively more reinforced, the walls shifting from standard composite to what looked like blast-resistant alloy. Warning signs multiplied with each turn. "Authorized personnel only. Extreme hazard. Do not approach without protective gear." Henry's stomach began attempting complex acrobatic maneuvers. Holding Bay 12 was less a room and more a vault. The security officers made him palm scan 3 separate panels before the final door groaned open, revealing a space that seemed designed to contain something considerably more dangerous than office supplies. Plasma barriers hummed along the ceiling. The floor was reinforced durasteel, scorched in places, and in the center, surrounded by enough chains to anchor a small spacecraft, was a woman. She was crouched like a predator, even bound as she was, her body coiled with barely contained violence. Her skin was the deep red of oxygenated blood, marked with pale scars that formed patterns he suspected were intentional. Her hair fell in a wild black cascade over shoulders that, despite her restraints, held no hint of submission. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They glowed with an inner light, amber and furious, tracking his movement with the focus of something that had spent its entire life hunting. Her ears rose to elegant points, the only feature that marked her as something other than human, though everything else about her screamed the same truth. "This is your Category 7 asset," one of the officers said, consulting his own datapad. "Designation, Prisoner 47 Kappa, last surviving member of the Crimson Talon clan. Vampire classification, Elite Warrior caste. Kill count verified at 473, though intelligence suspects the actual number is significantly higher." Henry stared. The woman stared back. Somewhere in the station, a ventilation system hummed. "I'm sorry," Henry finally managed. "Did you say you're giving me a person?" "Asset," the officer corrected. "Can't execute her per the treaty terms. Can't release her because she'd probably kill half the station before we could stop her. Can't keep her in standard detention because she's escaped from every facility we've tried. Command decided reassignment to individual custody was the most efficient solution." "Efficient," Henry repeated, the word tasting surreal in his mouth. The woman smiled then, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp. She said something in a language that sounded like breaking glass and distant thunder. "She says you look soft," the second officer translated, sounding almost apologetic, "and that she's going to enjoy killing you when the chains fail." "When?" Henry squeaked. "Not if." "They always fail eventually," the officer said. "These are rated for 6 months, maybe 8 if you're lucky. Sign here." They handed him a datapad. Henry looked at the woman who was now making a purring sound that definitely qualified as threatening. He looked at the chains, which suddenly seemed far less substantial than advertised. He looked at the data pad, where his thumbprint would seal whatever cosmic joke the universe was currently playing on him. "Can I refuse?" "You can," the first officer said. "But then she goes back into general distribution, and honestly, you seem like you might survive her. The next person might not be as lucky, and Command really doesn't want to explain a murder to the treaty inspectors." The woman laughed, a sound like wind through a graveyard. Henry pressed his thumb to the screen. The transport cart struggled with her weight, which seemed impossible given her frame, until Henry remembered the briefing packet mentioned something about bone density 3 times human standard. The cart's anti-grav compensators whined in protest as they maneuvered through the station corridors, drawing stares from everyone they passed. His new asset seemed to enjoy the attention, baring her teeth at a group of engineers who scrambled backward into a doorway. "Could you not do that?" Henry asked. She responded with what sounded like a question, her glowing eyes fixed on him with unnerving intensity. "I don't speak—" He checked the packet, squinting at the pronunciation guide. "Krevnash. Do you understand standard?" She tilted her head, considering. Then in a voice like gravel sliding over metal, "Soft, weak, die soon." "Fantastic. You know the cheerful words." Henry palmed open his quarters, immediately regretting every life choice that had led to this moment. His assigned space was barely large enough for one person, and that was before accounting for a chained vampire warrior who apparently wanted him dead. "Welcome to your new home, I suppose. It's not much, but—" She interrupted with a stream of her own language, sharp and contemptuous. "I'm going to assume you're critiquing my interior design choices," Henry said, guiding the cart inside. "For the record, military housing doesn't leave much room for personality." The biggest challenge was finding somewhere to secure her chains. His quarters featured a bed, a desk, a small food preparation unit, and a hygiene station. Nothing designed to anchor a prisoner. Henry ended up mag-locking the chains to the structural support beam that ran along the ceiling, which at least kept her away from anything she could use as a weapon. She tested the chains immediately, yanking hard enough to make the entire room shudder. "Please don't bring down the ceiling," Henry said. "I'm still paying off the damage deposit from my last assignment." She settled into a crouch, watching him with that predatory focus. Henry tried to ignore her while he unpacked his minimal belongings, but it was like trying to ignore a plasma fire. Every movement he made, her eyes tracked. When he accessed his terminal, she leaned forward, chains rattling. When he opened his footlocker, she made a low sound that might have been curiosity or hunger. "So," Henry said, desperately trying to fill the terrible silence, "do you have a name? Something I can call you that isn't prisoner 47 Kappa?" She spoke, a long phrase that sounded like rocks in a tumbler mixed with wind chimes. "Right. I'm going to need something shorter." He studied her red skin, her fierce expression, the way the station lights caught in her dark hair. "How about red? Simple, descriptive, easy to remember when you're trying to kill me." Her eyes narrowed. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, "Red!" She tested the word, her accent making it sound alien and sharp. "Stupid name. Weak." "You're welcome," Henry muttered. The first real problem emerged around what the station designated as evening cycle. Henry realized he had no idea what she ate. The briefing packet was spectacularly unhelpful, containing mostly threat assessments and combat statistics. There was a single line about dietary requirements that referenced an appendix that wasn't included. "Are you hungry?" he tried. Red stared at him. "Food," Henry said, miming eating in a way that made him feel ridiculous. "Do you need food?" "Blood," she said, and smiled with all those sharp teeth. Henry's heart performed an emergency stop. "I'm sorry. What?" "Vampire," she said, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "Blood. Right, yes, vampire. I got that part." Henry's mind raced through his limited medical training. "But like, actual blood? Fresh blood? Human blood?" Each question made things worse, because I'm using mine currently, and I'd really prefer to keep it. She laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Then she said something in Krevnash that went on for several sentences, growing more amused as she spoke. I definitely don't know what you just said, but I feel insulted anyway. Red seemed to consider, then spoke slowly in broken standard. Not want human blood, stupid human, weak blood, no good. She made a disgusted face. Need starstone, metal, from dying sun. Henry blinked. You eat rocks from dying stars. Not rocks, mineral, special. She gestured at her chains, frustrated by the limitation. In old territory, mined from stellar collapse, very rare, very, she searched for the word, expensive. Of course it is, Henry said, because nothing about this situation could be simple. He pulled up the station's commercial database, searching for anything related to vampire dietary supplements. The results were depressing. Synthetic alternatives existed, but they cost more than his entire yearly salary. This is going to be a problem. Red watched him work, her amusement fading into something that might have been respect. When he finally looked up, exhausted and no closer to a solution, she spoke in careful standard. You try. Strange. Strange bad or strange good? She considered this seriously. Strange, not expected. Yeah, well, Henry said, rubbing his eyes. Nothing about today was expected. I'm still processing the fact that I apparently own a person now, which feels deeply wrong on multiple levels. Not own, Red corrected, rattling her chains pointedly. Command own. You just... She struggled with the concept. Hold her. That's not better. No, she agreed. Not better. She settled back against the wall, still watching him, but with less immediate murder in her expression. You really not know vampire needs star mineral. The educational system failed me, Henry admitted. Red made a sound that might have been a laugh. Human education fail everyone. Despite everything, Henry smiled. The chains started showing stress fractures on the third day, hairline cracks that spiderwebbed across the reinforced links when Red stretched. Henry noticed during his morning routine, nearly dropping his synth coffee when he saw her testing the weakened points with careful, deliberate pressure. She caught him looking and went very still, her amber eyes locked on his face. He should have reported it immediately. Protocol demanded it. Instead, Henry heard himself say, How long do we have? Red's expression shifted into something almost like surprise. 2 weeks, maybe 3. That's faster than they estimated. They stupid, she said matter-of-factly. Make chains for normal vampire, not Crimson Talon. There was pride in her voice, the first real emotion besides rage and contempt he'd heard from her. Henry took a long drink of his terrible coffee, making a decision that probably qualified as treason or at least profound stupidity. What happens when they break? I leave, Red said simply. Or kill you. Depend on mood. That's refreshingly honest. She tilted her head, studying him with that unnerving focus. You not report? I'm thinking about it, Henry lied. He'd already decided, though he couldn't articulate why, even to himself. Maybe it was the absurdity of the entire situation. Maybe it was the way she'd laughed at his terrible jokes about human education. Maybe he was just tired of being part of a system that treated people, even dangerous, terrifying people, like equipment. But if I don't report it, we need to figure out what happens next. Next, Red repeated, as if testing the concept. Strange word. Implies future. You don't think about the future? Crimson Talon warrior think about honor, about battle, about death. She rattled her chains, the sound sharp in the small quarters. Not think about next. Henry accessed his terminal, pulling up the station manifest. Well, I've been thinking about it obsessively, actually. Specifically about keeping you alive, which turns out to be expensive and complicated. He'd spent the last 2 days researching, calling in favors, navigating bureaucratic mazes. I found a synthetic substitute for your star mineral. It's designed for deep space mining operations where crews can't access natural stellar deposits. Red leaned forward, suddenly intent. Show! He projected the specifications into the air between them. Red studied the holographic display with the focus of someone reading a technical manual, which jarred against her entire savage warrior aesthetic. She reached out, forgetting about the chains, and they snapped taut with a metallic shriek. Henry flinched, but Red just growled in frustration. "Let me," Henry said, manipulating the display to rotate it toward her. "Can you read standard technical notation?" "Yes," Red said, sounding insulted. "Crimson Talon engineer weapons. Build ships, not just kill." She examined the molecular breakdown, her glowing eyes tracking across the data with obvious expertise. This, acceptable, not perfect, but work. "There's a problem," Henry admitted. "It costs more than my salary can cover. I can get maybe 2 months' worth, but after that, chains break anyway," Red interrupted. "So problem solve itself." "That's one way to look at it, I suppose." She was quiet for a long moment, still studying the projection. Then, "Why you do this? I tell you I might kill you. I not lie. I very good at killing." "I know," Henry said. "Your file was very thorough on that point. 473 confirmed kills, tactical genius, single-handedly held the Proxima blockade for 6 days." He met her eyes. "But you also built the weapons that did it. You're not just a killer. You're an engineer, a strategist, probably a lot of other things that don't fit into Command's neat little categories." Red stared at him like he'd started speaking in her language. "You read file? Whole file?" "Of course I read it. You're living in my quarters, chained to my ceiling. Seemed like relevant information. Most human not read, just see vampire, see red skin, see teeth." She bared them reflexively. "See monster." "I mean, you are objectively terrifying," Henry said, "but so is my commanding officer, and nobody chains her to anything." He ordered the synthetic mineral compound, watching his bank account drain to alarming levels. "This should arrive in 3 days. We'll see if it actually works. And if not work, then I've wasted a lot of money and we're back to you possibly killing me, I guess." Red made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. "You strange, Henry, very strange." It was the first time she'd used his name. He tried not to show how much that surprised him. "Can I ask you something?" Henry said, pulling up another file he'd been researching. "Your clan, the Crimson Talon. The war records say you never surrendered, that every member fought to the death, but you're here. What happened?" Red's expression went cold, her whole body tensing against the chains. For a moment, Henry thought he'd pushed too far. Then she spoke, her voice low and precise. "Clan law say warrior die in battle, earn place in star memory. But I not die. Enemy capture me alive, use stasis field before I could—" She made a sharp gesture across her throat. "Dishonor. Cannot join clan in death. Cannot fight. Just exist. Worse than death." "I'm sorry," Henry said, meaning it. "Sorry not fix dishonor." "No," Henry agreed. "But maybe we can fix the other problems first and worry about honor later." Red looked at him for a long time, her amber eyes unreadable. Then she settled back against the wall, some of the tension bleeding from her shoulders. "Maybe," she said quietly, "maybe fix small problems first." The mineral compound arrived ahead of schedule, packaged in a container that required 3 different hazard warnings. Henry watched nervously as Red consumed it, the dark crystals dissolving against her tongue with a faint luminescence. She closed her eyes, going very still. "Well?" Henry asked after what felt like an eternity. Red opened her eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled without showing her teeth. "Not perfect," she said, "but good enough." The chains broke on a Tuesday, which Henry only knew because the station's artificial time cycle had become the only marker of normalcy in his increasingly bizarre life. He was reviewing supply manifests when he heard the distinctive sound of reinforced alloy finally surrendering to constant pressure. The metallic crack echoed through his quarters like a gunshot. Red stood in the center of the room, broken chains pooled at her feet, her arms spread wide as if testing the limits of freedom. She rolled her shoulders, joints popping audibly, and Henry realized she could cross the distance between them in less than a second if she wanted. His hand didn't move toward the emergency beacon on his terminal. He just waited. "Well," Red said, examining the broken restraints with satisfaction, "faster than expected." "Congratulations on your prison break," Henry said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "Are you going to kill me now, or would you like breakfast first?" She laughed, the sound less harsh than it had been 2 weeks ago. Already eat mineral. Very thoughtful you leave extra ration. She stepped over the chains, moving toward his desk with the fluid grace of a predator. Now what, Henry? You call security? Sound alarm? Run? I was thinking about coffee, actually. Want some? Red stopped, clearly not expecting that response. Coffee? It's terrible, but it's caffeinated, which is the main point. Henry activated his small food processor, which began its usual grinding complaint. I'm not calling security because that would be complicated and involve a lot of paperwork. I hate paperwork. I could leave, Red said carefully, watching him. Walk out, disappear into station, maybe steal ship. You could, Henry agreed, but you'd be arrested within an hour. You're very distinctive, and this station has facial recognition on every corridor. He handed her a cup of the steaming liquid. Also, stealing military vessels is generally frowned upon. Red accepted the coffee suspiciously, sniffing it before taking a cautious sip. Her face contorted. This terrible. I warned you. She took another sip anyway, settling into his desk chair with casual ownership. So, not call security, not let me leave. What plan? Henry had been thinking about this for days since he'd first noticed the chains weakening. I was hoping we could pretend the chains are still working for another month or so, until I figure out something better. Pretend. You go back to your spot when anyone visits. Rattle dramatically. Look threatening. He demonstrated, which looked ridiculous and made Red grin. I submit reports saying everything is secure. Everyone's happy. Everyone except Truth, Red said. Truth is overrated, Henry replied. I'm an atmospheric processor technician, pretending to be a jailer. You're an elite warrior pretending to be imprisoned. We're both excellently qualified for pretending. Red considered this while drinking more terrible coffee. Why you trust me? I tell you I might kill you. Still true. Is it though? Henry asked. Because you've been unchained for 5 minutes and I'm still alive. That's got to count for something. Maybe I wait. Kill you later when not expect. Red, if you wanted me dead, I'd be dead. You're one of the most dangerous people in known space. I'm someone who once flooded a storage bay trying to fix a coffee maker. He retrieved his own cup, joining her. I think we've moved past the immediate murder phase of our relationship. She was quiet, staring into the dark liquid. In my culture, when warriors save another warrior from dishonor, create bond. Debt of honor. I didn't save you from anything. You try fix impossible situation. You read my file, learn about clan, about engineering, about who I am, not just what I kill. You spend money you not have to feed me properly. She met his eyes. You give choice, not just chain. Choice is, she searched for the word, rare, valuable. Henry felt uncomfortable with the weight of her gratitude. I'm just trying not to be terrible at this. Most human, very terrible at this, Red assured him. You only medium terrible. Is improvement. I'll take that as a compliment. Red set down her cup and stood, moving to the storage locker Henry had been avoiding for weeks. You have tools in here? Some basic maintenance equipment. Why? She pulled out a hydrospanner and a circuit tester, examining them with obvious pleasure. I not build anything for months. Go crazy just sitting, waiting, being prisoner. She looked at him hopefully. You have spare parts? Broken things? Anything I can fix? Henry pulled up his terminal, accessing the station's general maintenance requests. I can probably requisition some repair work. What kind of things can you build? Weapons, ships, navigation systems, power cores, anything with circuits and logic. Red was already sorting through his tools, organizing them with practiced efficiency. Crimson Talon engineer best in galaxy. We build technology that nearly win war. Maybe start with something smaller than war-winning technology, Henry suggested, like fixing the environmental controls. My quarters are always either too hot or too cold. Red examined his climate system, pulling the access panel off with casual strength that bent the supposedly secure fasteners. This is garbage. Terrible design. Who built this? Probably the lowest bidder on a military contract. Explain much. She pulled out components, laying them across his desk in organized rows. I fix, make better, then maybe build other things, yes? Yes, Henry said, watching her work with fascination. This was someone completely different from the chained, snarling creature from the distribution hall. Her hands moved with precision and confidence, her whole body animated by purpose. But nothing that could be used as a weapon. I'm already bending several regulations here. All technology can be weapon if try hard enough, Red said cheerfully. But I promise, no obvious weapons, just improvements. She worked through the night cycle, her glowing eyes bright in the dimness of his quarters, humming something that might have been a Crimson Talon work song. Henry tried to sleep but kept watching her instead. This impossible person who'd somehow become his responsibility, and maybe, impossibly, something like a friend. When morning cycle arrived, his environmental system purred with perfect efficiency for the first time since he'd moved in. Better? Red asked, wiping lubricant from her hands. Much better, Henry admitted. Thank you. She smiled, still without showing her teeth. Debt of honor, she said simply. You help me, I help you, is how things should work. The inspection notice arrived with all the warmth of an airlock malfunction. Command was sending a review team to verify proper containment of high-value assets, scheduled for 3 days from now. Henry read the message twice, his stomach performing complicated gravitational maneuvers, before showing it to Red. She was building something intricate from salvaged parts, her workspace having gradually consumed most of his desk. She'd spent the last week fixing half the broken equipment on the station, earning Henry a reputation as some kind of maintenance miracle worker. Nobody questioned why his prisoner never appeared in the workshop requests. Nobody looked too closely at anything, which had been working beautifully until now. This is problem, Red said, reading over his shoulder. She smelled like ozone and metal, familiar scents that had become part of his daily routine. Big problem. I'm aware, Henry said. They're going to want to see you properly restrained. They'll probably run integrity tests on the containment systems. He gestured at the broken chains, which Red had welded into a surprisingly artistic wall decoration. We're going to need a plan. Red grinned, and this time she showed all her teeth. I have idea. Is terrible idea. Very risky. Probably fail. Those are my favorite kind of ideas lately. She pulled up a schematic on his terminal, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. We make them think chains still work. Build fake system, looks real, but is just performance. Theater. You want to stage a containment system? Yes. I build new chains. Attached to magnetic locks I control with hidden remote. During inspection, I pretend to be dangerous prisoner. Snarl, threaten, pull against chains. She demonstrated, her face shifting into that feral expression he hadn't seen in weeks. It was startling how quickly she could switch between engineer and predator. Chains hold because I make them hold, not because they real. That's completely insane, Henry said. What if they test the structural integrity? Then I make chains that pass test, but release when I want. Is engineering problem. I'm very good at engineering problems. Red was already sketching modifications, her enthusiasm building. Need materials, though. Reinforced cable, magnetic couplers, control circuit, remote transmitter. Henry checked the requisition system. I can get most of this through normal maintenance channels, but the remote transmitter might raise flags. I build remote from spare parts. Easy. Red paused, looking at him seriously. You understand if this fail, I go back to real prison? Or worse. I understand if this fails, I'm probably court-martialed for a dozen regulation violations, Henry countered. We're both taking risks here. Yes, but your risk is career. My risk is freedom. She touched his arm briefly, the first voluntary physical contact she'd initiated. I not forget this. What you do for me. You fixed my environmental control, Henry said, deflecting, and my food processor, and apparently half the station's critical systems. I'd say we're even. Not even, not close. Red turned back to her schematics. But we argue about debt later. Now we build very convincing fake prison. They worked through 2 sleep cycles, Red's hands moving with the certainty of someone who'd built weapon systems under combat conditions. She fabricated chains that would support her full weight, integrated magnetic locks that responded to a remote no larger than Henry's thumbnail, and even added stress sensors that would display appropriate readings during integrity tests. "You're terrifyingly good at this," Henry observed, watching her calibrate the final connections. "Crimson Talon built siege engines that could crack planetary shields," Red said without looking up. "Fake chains is relaxing compared to that." "What happened to your clan?" Henry asked, the question emerging before he could stop it. "I mean, I know they died in the war, but they die with honor," Red interrupted, her voice flat. "Fighting to last breath. I only one captured alive, because I too stubborn to die when supposed to." She tested the chain release, the links separating and reconnecting with smooth precision. "Clan law say captured warrior is dead warrior. No honor, no memory, no place in star songs. I am ghost, walking dishonor." "That seems harsh." "Is tradition, old tradition, from time when capture mean torture, when enemy would use prisoner against clan." Red sat back, examining her work. "But war is over. Clan is gone. Just me left, and I trapped between dead tradition and impossible present." "Maybe traditions can change," Henry suggested carefully. "Maybe being the last of your clan means you get to decide what honor means now." Red looked at him with those glowing amber eyes, expression unreadable. "You say strange things, Henry. Dangerous things. Things that make me think about future again. Is that bad?" "Not know yet. Ask me after inspection." The 3 days evaporated faster than atmosphere through a hull breach. Henry rehearsed his statements, reviewed protocols, and tried not to look like someone actively deceiving military command. Red prepared in her own way, practicing her snarls and studying footage of actual containment failures to make her performance more authentic. "You're a perfectionist about fake imprisonment," Henry noted. "If do thing correctly," Red replied. "Even pretend thing." The morning of the inspection, Red secured herself in the fabricated chains, testing the remote one final time before handing it to Henry. "Remember, wait until they finish integrity scan before I do big dramatic pull. Make them think chains barely hold." "Got it." You'll snarl menacingly. I'll look appropriately nervous. They'll check their boxes and leave. Simple plan, Red agreed. What possibly go wrong? Please don't jinx this. The inspection team arrived precisely on schedule, led by a severe-looking commander whose expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. She swept into Henry's quarters with 2 technicians, barely acknowledging him before focusing on Red. Prisoner 47 Kappa, the commander said, consulting her datapad. Still contained, I see. Red erupted into motion, lunging against the chains with a roar that made Henry's heart stop even though he knew it was performance. The chains snapped taut, the magnetic locks engaging with satisfying mechanical precision. Red snarled something in Krevnash that sounded absolutely venomous. She seems energetic, the commander observed. She has good days and bad days, Henry managed. Today is apparently a bad day. The technicians ran their scans while Red maintained her act, straining against the restraints with carefully calibrated force. The sensors registered exactly what they should: high stress, secure locks, containment holding within acceptable parameters. Everything appears in order, one technician reported. Henry allowed himself to breathe. Then Red smiled at the commander and said in perfect, unaccented standard, "You know chains are fake, yes?" Henry's soul left his body. The silence that followed Red's declaration could have swallowed a small moon. Henry watched his entire military career flash before his eyes, which was depressing because most of it involved cleaning air filters and filing maintenance reports. The commander's expression remained perfectly neutral, which somehow made everything worse. "Explain," she said simply. Red rattled her chains once for effect, then triggered the remote she'd somehow kept hidden. The magnetic locks released with a soft click, and the chains pooled at her feet like metallic water. "I built fake containment 3 days ago. This one," she pointed at Henry. "He know about it. We planned together." Henry wanted to sink through the floor and keep going until he reached the station's reactor core. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can," the commander interrupted. She turned to her technicians. "Leave us." They departed quickly, the door sealing behind them with ominous finality. The commander studied Red with clinical interest, then shifted her attention to Henry. How long has she been unrestrained? 2 weeks, Henry admitted, seeing no point in lying now. The original chains failed ahead of schedule. And you didn't report it because? Because I'm an idiot, Henry offered. Because the whole situation felt wrong? Because she hadn't actually killed me and seemed more interested in fixing my environmental controls than escaping? I fixed many things, Red added helpfully. Climate system, food processor, waste recycler, 12 other quarters on this level. All work better now. You should promote him. The commander's eyebrow performed an impressive climb toward her hairline. You've been doing maintenance work? Engineering is engineering, Red said with a shrug. Warrior skill is warrior skill. I am both. Was waste to sit in chains doing nothing when station falling apart around us. The station is not falling apart, the commander said, but without much conviction. She walked a slow circle around Red, who stood relaxed and unthreatening, despite being completely free. You're telling me that the most dangerous prisoner in our custody has been wandering around Officer Castellan's quarters, fixing appliances and planning elaborate deceptions? Also making coffee less terrible, Red said. Still terrible, but less. Is improvement. She's actually brilliant, Henry said, deciding that complete honesty was his only remaining option. Her file listed her kill count, but barely mentioned that she designed half the weapon systems that nearly won the war. She's wasted in containment. She should be working, building, contributing something other than being chained up like an animal. The commander pulled up her datapad, scrolling through what looked like extensive files. Her psychological evaluation flagged her as high risk for violence and escape. Did you do psychological evaluation after capture? Red asked. After I watch entire clan die? After I failed to join them with honor? After I spend 6 months in 8 different prisons, each one treating me like rabid animal? Her voice remained calm, but Henry heard the edge beneath it. Evaluation not measure who I am. Measure who I was in worst moment of my life. That's a fair point, the commander admitted. She looked at Henry again. You've been living with her for 3 weeks. Has she threatened you? Attempted escape? Shown any signs of the violent tendencies listed in her file? She threatened to kill me on day 1, Henry said honestly, but I'm pretty sure that was mostly posturing. Since then, she's been helpful, funny even. We drink terrible coffee together and argue about engineering principles I don't understand. It's weird, but it works. Weird is generous, the commander muttered. She was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Officer Castellan, your service record shows 3 years of adequate but unremarkable performance. No commendations, no disciplinary actions, nothing to suggest you'd be capable of successfully managing our most dangerous prisoner. I didn't manage her, Henry protested. I just treated her like a person instead of a weapon. Revolutionary concept, Red said dryly. The commander actually smiled, a brief flash that humanized her severe features. The treaty terms state we cannot execute prisoners of war, cannot release them if they pose a continued threat, and cannot detain them indefinitely without purpose. We've been struggling with this for months. She tapped her datapad. But the treaty also includes provisions for rehabilitation and reintegration. Henry's heart, which had been residing somewhere near his feet, cautiously returned to his chest. Reintegration? There's a civilian engineering consortium that's been requesting skilled personnel for reconstruction efforts in the border zones. They need people who understand alien technology, who can interface with different species, who have combat engineering experience. She looked at Red. The pay is minimal, the work is dangerous, and you'd be under monitoring for at least 2 years. But it's an option that doesn't involve chains. Red's expression was carefully neutral, but Henry saw the hope flickering in her amber eyes. Why you offer this? I am enemy. I kill many humans. Because the war is over, the commander said simply, and because keeping you locked up wastes resources we don't have while ignoring skills we desperately need. She turned to Henry. Officer Castellan, your service ends in 6 weeks. Have you considered your post-military plans? Henry blinked at the abrupt subject change. I haven't really thought about it. The same consortium needs project managers, people who can handle complicated logistics and complex personalities. Her smile returned briefly. You seem uniquely qualified for the latter. Red made a sound that was definitely a laugh. He very good with complex personalities. Expert level. I'm standing right here, Henry said. Yes, and you're about to make a decision, the commander replied. She pulled up a contract on her datapad, displaying it in the air between them. This is a civilian employment agreement. Both of you sign it, and you're released from military custody into the consortium's supervision. You work together on reconstruction projects, submit to regular monitoring, and prove that this— She gestured at the broken chains, the improvised workspace, the strange partnership they'd built— wasn't just luck. Henry read through the contract quickly, his mind racing. 6 weeks had become, 6 months had become, the possibility of an actual future. What if we fail? What if the monitoring determines she's still a threat? Then she goes back to detention, and you face charges for everything you've done wrong here. The commander's expression softened slightly. But Officer Castellan, you've already been failing successfully for 3 weeks. I suspect you'll continue that trend. Is that a compliment? Henry asked. Take it however you like. Red was reading the contract with intense focus, her engineering mind probably analyzing every clause and subcondition. This say I work on infrastructure rebuilding, power systems, water purification, environmental controls. Exactly the kind of critical systems that desperate colonies are willing to overlook your history for, the commander confirmed. And I work with him? Red pointed at Henry. Specifically with him, not just same project. The contract specifies paired placement for monitoring purposes. You're considered a team asset. Asset, Red repeated and grinned. I moved from Category 7 asset to team asset. Is promotion. I can't believe you're joking about this, Henry said. I joke or I think too hard about future, Red replied. Joking is safer. She looked at him seriously. You want this? Want strange vampire engineer following you to civilian work? I come with much baggage. Trauma, dishonor, entire dead clan worth of complications. You also come with the ability to fix anything mechanical, an encyclopedic knowledge of weapon systems that might actually be useful for dismantling them. And you make me laugh even when I'm terrified, Henry said. Plus, I've already invested a lot of money in your mineral supplements. Seems wasteful to stop now. Red's smile was genuine, warm, without any of the predatory edge from those first days. Practical, human. I like this about you. Henry pressed his thumb to the contract, watching his biometric signature seal itself into the document. Red did the same, her fingerprint glowing briefly before the contract registered complete. The commander collected her datapad, heading for the door. You ship out in 2 weeks. Make sure your affairs are in order. And Officer Castellan? Next time you notice a containment failure, report it immediately. Will do, Commander. She paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, you did well. Unconventionally, possibly illegally, but well. Then she was gone, the door sealing behind her. Henry and Red stood in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. The broken chains still lay on the floor, the workspace still covered Red's half of the desk, the terrible coffee maker still hummed in the corner. So, Red said finally, we have jobs now. Real jobs. Building things instead of breaking things. Apparently, Henry agreed. Are you ready for that? For actually having a future? Red walked to the small window that looked out over the station's docking array, stars visible beyond the metal and glass. Crimson Talon law say I am dead. Ghost, dishonored. She touched the window, her red fingers stark against the transparency. But maybe Ghost can build new traditions. Maybe last warrior of dead clan can decide honor is in creation, not destruction, in choosing future instead of clinging to past. That sounds wise, Henry said, joining her at the window. Is probably stupid, Red corrected, but is my stupid to choose. Our stupid, Henry amended. We're a team asset now, remember? She laughed, the sound lighter than he'd ever heard it. Yes, team asset, strange human and dangerous vampire, building power systems and water purifiers in places nobody else wants to go. She turned to him, her glowing eyes reflecting the starlight. Is good future, Henry. Weird future, but good. Yeah, Henry said. watching ships come and go in the dark beyond the station, each one carrying people toward destinations unknown. It really is. 2 weeks later, they boarded a transport headed for the Kepler colonies, their combined belongings fitting into 2 standard cargo containers. Red had built a portable workshop from salvaged parts. Henry had finally learned to make coffee that was only moderately terrible. And somewhere in the shift from prisoner and keeper to partners and equals, they'd found something neither of them had expected, a reason to stop looking backward and start building forward. The chains stayed behind, welded into abstract art on Henry's former quarters wall. A memorial to captivity, or maybe just a reminder that sometimes the best solutions to impossible problems involve breaking the rules, trusting the wrong people, and believing that futures could be chosen rather than assigned. As their transport jumped into slipstream,